Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again with a quick video today. Well, might be quick. We'll kind of see how long this goes. I actually was going back and forth between two other video ideas for this week, but after watching my friend AP, A Critical Dragons video from Monday, he totally inspired me to switch up things and respond, or not necessarily respond so much as to narrow and to explore, maybe in a more focused way, his frustration, the frustration that he expressed in that video. And I wanted to focus on one specific book or set of books and one author. To be clear, this isn't me arguing against AP in any way, shape, or form. It's actually the opposite. I 100% agree with everything he said. It just so happens that what he was talking about more broadly lines up with my personal recent frustrations with criticism of a specific group of books. And we'll get to those books in a second. But first, brief recap of what AP's video was all about. Well, definitely go check out that video if you haven't. It's great. It's called Some Arguments I Am Sick of Hearing About Narrative. I'll put the link to that video in my description. In essence, AP is sick and tired of hearing critics say things like, oh, an author shouldn't put politics in their books, or authors shouldn't put their personal beliefs in books, or this type of book isn't the place to discuss modern politics. Any argument along those lines, AP does a terrific job pointing out how ridiculous those arguments actually are. Of course, authors should always feel free to explore whatever personal beliefs of theirs, whatever modern political issues they want to explore in their stories. Now, whether or not the authors explore these things in a convincing, exciting, or enlightening way, or maybe if the authors explore these things in a more distracting or off-putting or uncomfortable way. Now, those are all actually like fun, critical conversations that we can have, unlike the conversation and that I guess starts and kind of ends when someone says a blanket statement of authors shouldn't put politics in their books. It's too broad and too flimsy of an idea, and as AP points out in his video, it's really censorship heavy, and typically it's censorship along one political line, whichever any given critic likes it or not. If they're objecting to politics in a story, it might be because they don't agree with those politics, and that's really messy. Criticize how the political conversation was incorporated into the story, sure, but don't criticize that there's a political conversation at hand at all. So, this leads me to Halo. Yes, it might sound kind of weird to talk about a video game series and its relation to kind of such a heavy topic, or such a serious topic, but Halo, the massively popular, used to be a little more popular than it is today, but still pretty big deal, massively popular sci-fi first-person shooter space opera video game epic, and the expanded spin-off novels. Now there's 30 plus Halo novels out there, all written by a collection of 10 or so different authors, and that's not to mention an additional 15 or so writers who have dabbled in this universe with short stories. Also important to note, the Halo IP has changed hands. Early 2010s, 2010, 2011, around there, the video game developers Bungie, they stopped running things with Halo to go off and work on their next video game project, the Destiny series. And so when Bungie left, 343 Industries took over the Halo franchise, including taking over how the novels were assigned, contracted, so on. Prior to this big switch, about seven novels and one short story collection had all been published when Bungie was running things. Then switching over to the 343 era, and frankly the less popular era of the franchise, while 343 Industries were working on their first game, Halo 4, they asked two well-known sci-fi authors, or they tasked two well-known sci-fi authors with each writing a trilogy that would help bridge the gap between Bungie's Halo 3 and their 343's Halo 4. First, they had Greg Bear writing the Forerunner trilogy, exploring ancient galactic history and lore that would be relevant for the upcoming game. And then they had Karen Traviss write the Kilo 5 trilogy. This trilogy right here, these 3 books. Yeah. They had her write this trilogy that specifically details important events and the tense political situations in the universe timeline, connecting the dots between where we left characters at the end of Halo 3 and where they wind up in 343's projects like Halo 4, Halo 5, and so on. This Kilo 5 trilogy also had the hard task of continuing on some of the stories begun in the Bungie era novels, specifically the novels written by Eric Nyland. Nyland was the first author to write in this universe, and his books are beloved by fans. I quite like them myself. Now, we need to zoom in to look even more closely at this Kilo 5 trilogy. This is really kind of the subject of my video. See, Travis was put in a bit of an awkward spot. Halo 3 really was a lovely ending to that first main trilogy of games, and with that conclusion came the ending of a galactic war between the humans and, at first, a total coalition of all the other alien races calling themselves the Covenant. Near the end of that war, some infighting, civil war tore the Covenant apart, and humanity was able to seize the advantage, and then humanity was in the best position to begin peace talks after the war. Now, from that peaceful resolution at the end of Halo 3, obviously for a violent first-person shooter that the next game, Halo 4, would need to be, things somehow need to unravel out of that peaceful state into some kind of conflict, some kind of war, some kind of reason for space marines and super soldiers to be fighting aliens. Something needs to happen. And so from there, Travis has to use her Kilo 5 trilogy to explore the fragility in this temporary, intense peace between the humans and the other aliens of the galaxy. I hope I'm explaining kind of this context clearly enough for those of you maybe a little more unfamiliar with the series. So, let's talk about these books. It's a trilogy comprised of Glasslands, the Thursday War, and Mortal Dictata. The main story here is about a special operations unit called Kilo 5, assembled with the sneaky task of arming rebellious and fanatical groups of aliens, so that those groups can wage war against the leaders of their species, and so that they can just keep a civil war going, basically to keep these rival species weak, so that humanity always has the upper hand should any more wars break out. Now there's a ton of real-world comparisons you can make here. Take Charlie Wilson's Operation Cyclone, or probably the more significant connection, the whole Iran-Contra debacle. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Travis was basing Kilo 5's mission on situations such as these. Also, apologies if you'd like me to go into those real-world historical situations more. I'm definitely not an expert on either, but there's tons of wonderful books and even YouTube videos out there about such things. With YouTube videos, there's a video by Sean Munger, a historian, where he talks about the entire Iran-Contra conflict. If you're a fan of Halo and of these books, I'd definitely check out his video if I were you. I'll link to that as well in the description. There are fascinating similarities between that Iran-Contra scandal and at least the first 2 books of this trilogy. Yeah, and I'm personally very happy to see an author exploring such things in the Halo universe. Now, as political as some of that stuff can be, this isn't actually where we get a lot of the criticism and even like really passionate hate for this trilogy. I haven't mentioned it yet, but maybe I should have. There is a loud group of critics and Halo fans who really don't like what Karen Traviss did here. Greg Bear's Forerunner trilogy, a lot of the criticism with that series, some will say it's a little too philosophical or needlessly confusing, meandering at points. But most of the time, when I see people talking about their problems with his books, or even Eric Nyland's more fast-paced military action-focused original books, most of those criticisms about those different sets of novels, they all kind of operate like legitimate criticisms and interesting discussions that fans can have to critique and point out what one group of fans might like in one series versus what another group of fans might like in another, and you can have a pretty civil discussion about those things. Yeah, I don't think that's so much the case with Karen Travis's trilogy here. Again, these loud critics don't tend to hate on how the trilogy mirrors and criticizes U.S. foreign policy in the Cold War. No, these complaints are almost always about how Travis interpreted and incorporated one character and the other characters' conversations about that one character, that one specific person, who happened to be central to many of the fans' favorite novels, and many of my favorite novels too. This character's name is Dr. Catherine Halsey. So, kind of brief lore history in the Halo universe. Back before the humans ever encountered the aliens of the Covenant, the CIA of space, or they're known as the Office of Naval Intelligence, they signed off on a totally kind of ethical nightmare of a project where scientists and soldiers in colonial space went around and abducted a bunch of children. I think they were like 10, 11, 12 years old, somewhere in there. They replaced these children with flash clones to try and keep the parents and friends and family from worrying, but all those clones had problems, they got sick, they obviously didn't have quite the same memories and acted weirdly, and they all died pretty quickly. So just a nightmare for the families who all of a sudden one day their kid was a little bit different, and then a few months or years later their kid got really sick and tragically died. Awful. But of course the kids themselves who were taken away, they didn't have it that easy either. They were put through rigorous physical and mental and medical tests and exams and eventually augmentations. Many of the kids died in this process, and many kind of lost their minds a little bit. Really scary stuff. And all of this was done to turn the ones that did survive the training and augmentations, to turn them into Spartans, like the Master Chief. If you haven't played Halo, I'm sure you at least probably have an idea of what he looks like, who Master Chief is. And originally, these Spartans were just created. They were just supposed to be used to suppress rebellion, or to suppress rebellions and insurrectionists and human terrorist cells out in the colonies of humanity's kind of early days in galactic space and expanding. While it was really ethically slimy and unsettling when it started, as soon as the Covenant and this terrifying alien threat showed up, it became suddenly a lot more palatable because, oh yay, we have these perfect super soldiers, our only real strongest assets that can help us stand a sliver of a chance against the aliens. So, okay, good, the ends justified the means, the super soldier project wound up saving our species. We can all go home and sleep at night, right? Well, maybe, maybe not, but that's where I think any author now writing in the Halo universe has this wonderful kind of philosophical, ethical debate and situation to really play around in and to really explore in fascinating and compelling ways. And no author hired by either Bungie or 343 has to make all of their characters okay with the ethics of the Spartan program or make them all hate the idea of it. They can have their characters disagreeing and debating this all the way through their books. Many of the authors have, and I expect will continue to, explore this debate. None of the authors, however, have put this conversation as front and center as Karen Travis does in this trilogy. Remember that Special Ops titular team, the Kilo 5 unit? Well, one of them, the ones that are trying to, stir up things and start civil wars between the former enemies of the human race. This unit, one of them just so happens to be a Spartan, one of these super soldiers. Her name is Naomi. Also, the leader of this unit is a woman who started out as one of those abducted kids as well, but she failed somewhere along the way in the training and biological augmentation part of the program. And so she was set aside, and understandably both she and the successful Spartan Naomi This all leads to a bunch of really fascinating conversations about the ethics of the Spartan program between the two of them, sure, but it's not just the two of them talking about these things. It's also the other soldiers and members of this Kilo 5 unit weighing in. Now, where I think a lot of the hate for this trilogy comes from isn't so much that they talk about the ethics of the program at all, but that whenever they talk about the negative and more monstrous and unethical aspects of it, it seems like a lot of the characters all hate Dr. Halsey, the lead scientist responsible for, or participating in the team responsible for starting the Spartan program. Now, of course, there were several others involved at the beginning, and just because Halsey was such a well-known leader and part of that team, it can kind of feel like she's the specific target of all the hate when it comes to the negative and immoral aspects of the program. Many of Travis's characters on the Kilo 5 team really think of Halsey as a monster, and they really want her to be arrested and to suffer for her monstrous scientific experiments, child kidnappings, on all of the things that led to this program. There was one video in particular I watched a few months ago. Honestly, a great video, and I love the guy's ability to so succinctly recap a lot of what the various Halo novels are about. But when it got to him talking about the Kilo 5 trilogy, he said that Travis and all authors should never let their own worldviews, beliefs, or politics influence how they write about beloved characters or how they write fiction. And that's our problem. I fear that a lot of Halo fans wish Travis had never been given this trilogy to write in the first place. It seems like people really hate how much they think Karen Travis hates Dr. Halsey. And I think part of it is that Halsey has been such a beloved, yet controversial character central to the lore of the Halo franchise since the very beginning. The first Halo novel, The Fall of Reach, I believe came out the same year as the first game, and I fear that a lot of fans think Karen Travis shouldn't have even bothered to write this perspective on one of the franchise's favorite characters. Also, I worry that critics of this trilogy might be mistaking the other characters' collective and growing hatred of Halsey for Travis's own dislike of the character. I honestly have no idea how Karen Travis personally feels about the fictional character, Dr. Catherine Halsey, and whether or not she loves or hates the character. I think it is perfectly fine for her to have her passionate feelings about this character influencing the way she writes the perspectives of other characters that she's adding to this universe, and other characters she's using to explore these interesting ethical debates. Real quickly, I went to Goodreads, and this might have been a mistake. This might not be the most representative audience, but I found some very strange negative reviews about I found a lot about all three of these books. I'm gonna reference a few about this one, and I'm not gonna, I don't want to gang up on anyone or anything, so I'll read quotes from some of these. If anybody wants to see more context to any of these reviews, let me know. We can chat about that. But yeah, I just wanted to read some of this stuff as evidence that this is kind of a problem with the critical reaction to this series that's different and stranger than critical reaction response to the rest of the Halo books. One Goodreads review says that Nyland set the right tone with a neutral and near impartial prose as well as military jargon-laced dialogue. Instead, Travis uses a liberal arts tone. I thought that was a little bit silly because I'm not sure what a liberal arts tone is. I'm not sure if he's trying to say that there's more of a English literature feel to this, and I also really object to the idea that the first author of these Halo books set a right tone, and that there is a right or a wrong tone to approach the series with. Yeah, so that's kind of a problem. Multiple Goodreads reviewers, I should also add, they got so bored and frustrated with these books and with Travis's handling of characters in these books that they, in their reviews, mentioned that they just skipped entire chapters and entire sections, and they didn't actually finish the book or the books before writing their reviews. And so, it's always frustrating to see people coming down so critically and making kind of nonsensical arguments. about books that they didn't even read the entire thing of where who knows in those parts that they skip. There could have been much more. Those sections could have been really helpful context that might have addressed their problems with the book, but they won't know because they just didn't read those, and yet they still go and leave a 1-star review on Goodreads. That's always ridiculous to me and just silly. Like, yeah, if you're not enjoying a book, you don't have to finish it, sure, but then to go and give it a rating and give it a full review like you're mad at it, no. To review the thing, actually engage with it and read it and see how you feel. Anyway, another review said the book needed to deal with the aftermath of the war. And just, it was a shorter review, and it just started off like that. And yeah, again, it's like these reviewers are saying what these books needed to do, what tone they needed to have, what's the right approach. When I think that's so limiting and so strange to impose that kind of thinking on any author, on any creative person. So yeah, that was a problem. Another review, this one was full of upsetting and unsettling language. They say, Travis personally hates genetically enhanced soldiers. I'm not sure why they know that or why they think that. They also said, all of them hate Halsey, and we're expected to support them. Again, I'm not really sure where they're getting this from. I certainly felt no expectation to side with anyone on either side of these ethical debates while reading these books. Yeah, I don't feel like there was a, you have to feel one way or the other or else you're wrong. I seriously, I don't think that's in the books at all. Sure, a lot of the characters do feel one way, but that had no bearing on my personal feelings. Anyway, another quote from the same review said, what she writes is personal filibusters, not novels. So this person's saying that she's not even writing a book because they're personal and that because she's addressing things that are important to her personally. And so yeah, that's the kind of stuff that really hits at the heart of, I think, AP's frustration with a lot of criticism that he sees, and that stuff like that, and the comment that a YouTuber made in a Halo kind of books recap video that I alluded to. These things are really what sprang to mind when I watched AP's video, and I'm really glad he made that. Yeah, another review says, it's as if the author had some kind of personal mission to paint her, Halsey, as a bigger villain than the entire Covenant. To which I would say, maybe that was one of her personal goals, or that was one of her, she wanted to add that perspective to the Halo universe, and if she did have that personal mission, why is that bad? Like, what's necessarily so wrong with that? Another reviewer claims there was too much character development of Dr. Halsey. I think that one's just confused. It's just silly. And then another 1-star review says, it's clear that Travis has injected her own moral viewpoint into every character in this book. So yeah, this sounds a lot like the stuff that I'm trying to say we shouldn't do, we shouldn't criticize. I will say with that one though, they are expressing something I did find in a lot of the more negative reviews, which I think is fine to have a negative review about how Travis handles certain elements and certain themes in these books, to object to her addressing these things at all or incorporating any certain perspectives in the first place. That's where the problem is. But to talk about how she did things, I think that's a much more valid kind of theater of criticism, because this critic, that quote I just said, it kind of calls to mind something that I saw in a lot of other reviews, that much of the issue for some fans isn't that Travis is injecting her own moral and personal viewpoints into the story. It's that she's given every character this same moral viewpoint. I think I'd slightly disagree with that, just from what I recall of these books and the different characters that I thought stood out pretty well from one another. But I do think it is a much more valid criticism to say an author shouldn't put their personal beliefs in and make every character in their story agree with the author's personal beliefs. That's much more valid than saying just that an author shouldn't put their personal beliefs in a story. Of course, an author should be able to do that. But if it starts to impact make all of the characters seem too same and too monotonous, then I can see there's a little bit more of a conversation. So yeah, I included that quote there because I think it kind of bridges, or it straddles this weird line between the type of criticism that AP and I are frustrated with seeing and a way to kind of start transforming it into a more productive conversation. Again, the quote was, "It's clear that Travis has injected her own moral viewpoint into every character in this book." So yeah, it's clear that Travis has injected her own moral viewpoint. That shouldn't be a problem, and that shouldn't be a reason to hate on a book, right? But that she's injecting her own moral viewpoint into every character in the book, then you can kind of have an interesting conversation. Again, though, it's a Goodreads review, and they don't get that deep into it, but I did want to give that one a little bit more credit. So, yeah, that's just some of the evidence that I gathered that I wanted to point to. Long story short, whether or not Karen Travis loves or hates Dr. Halsey, I think it is perfectly fine for her to have her passionate feelings about this character influence the way she writes the perspectives of her other characters that she's adding to the lore in this world, and other characters she's using to explore these interesting ethical debates. Now, what makes this case study a little bit unique is the whole different authors thing. That video I mentioned, again, for the most part, a great video, but that critic argued that authors shouldn't let their own politics or personal agendas impact a story, especially when they're basically writing it for someone else. When they're contracted to tell a story within an established universe with established characters, themes, etc. I can start to see why someone might think this is an adequate defense of authors shouldn't be putting politics or personal beliefs into their books. If you wanted to say an author shouldn't do this when they're writing in someone else's world and writing about someone else's characters, I can see a bit of the thinking there, but then I keep coming back to the same question of why not? Why shouldn't authors, given the keys to the kingdom, as it were, take advantage of every tool in the established sandbox of Halo to explore something unique and different? If they've been given this great gift to explore things that they want to explore in this world, why shouldn't they? If Bungie Studios or 343 Industries really wanted to protect their IP from politically motivated and passionate authors from injecting their universe with their own personal beliefs and politically relevant ideas, then why would First Bungie have 13 different unique authors and perspectives writing in their world? And then why would 343 bring in an additional 12 authors and counting to write even more stories in that universe? What's the point of that if you don't get a Karen Travis every once in a while tackling this long-standing ethical debate from a lot of characters who feel very strongly on one side of the debate? What's the point if every single author has the majority of their characters all feeling similarly to how Eric Nyland's characters felt about Dr. Halsey? What's the point of getting all these other authors in there to explore different arguments and different perspectives in this universe? So, even though these books often get criticized for the inclusion of the Halsey hate, I don't wish the books did anything differently. I can't really, when we're spoiled with so much other wonderfully creative and thought-provoking artistic entries into the Halo universe. And you know what? Book 3 of this trilogy, even though I'm not the biggest fan of the first two, just for other reasons, Book 3 of this trilogy is easily one of my favorites. So thank you, Karen Travis, and especially thank you if you let your personal and political beliefs influence how you wrote this story. I really hope you did, and I hope all authors writing in a shared universe or in their own continue to do just that. Anyway, that should do it. I've rambled on long enough on this point. Thank you all so much for watching, and thanks, of course, to, well, first, AP Critical Dragon for making that video that reminded me how passionately I felt about this issue, specifically when it comes to these books. But again, of course, the biggest thank you has to go out to Karen Travis for writing something from her heart. I really hope she allowed her strong political or personal beliefs to impact how she wrote this trilogy, because I think most, if not all, art is going to be better when we make sure our artists have the freedom to do so. Thank you.